Ears. It's season 2 of Life with Jen, and life is better with you in it. And we are here in season 2 talking all about transitions and how we are with people in different seasons of their life. And so you're in for a real treat. And there may be some cussing involved in this, so gentle ears might not be the one for you. But we're going to introduce Aaron Saufley. So Aaron, welcome.
Hey, it is fantastic to be here, Jen. A pleasure.
Awesome. And we are going to talk tonight about what you do and how you're with people and how we can help others be with people. I think in this whole post-COVID world, we don't know how to build community. We don't know how to be a little bit gentler with ourselves and with others. And so tell us a little bit about you, Aaron, and what your day job is. What's your gig?
Okie doke. Well, a little bit about me first. A long time ago in not a galaxy far, far away, but grew up in the mountains of Virginia. Um, if your listeners know where Charlottesville, Virginia is, go 20 miles due west by way the crow flies, as we say, and you will go over the majestic Blue Ridge Mountains into the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. I grew up about 10 minutes south of the city of Harrisonburg, where James Madison University is, in a little village. Yes, we call it a village of Port Republic, Virginia, which has some historical significance. Back in June of 1862, Confederate General Stonewall Jackson had his headquarters in our little hamlet, and the Union soldiers found him, and he rode his horse down Main Street, narrowly escaping capture, crossing the bridge, burning it, and then the Battle of Port Republic was fought, which was the last battle of his Shenandoah Valley campaign of 1862. That is my little town's claim to fame. So that is where I grew up.
Is that the same as the whole burner bridge, like, is that like come from the same?
I don't think so, because there were a lot of bridges burned in that war. So, but hey, just for fun, we're gonna say yes.
Yeah, I love it. All right. So grew up outside of Charlottesville, the wineries there. Amazing. Tell us a little bit about maybe your career journey, and then tell us about what you do now.
Okay. So I ended up going to Bible college out of high school, and I had designs on being a pastor. I had known that since I was around maybe 13 or 14, that I had wanted to do that. So I go to Bible college and I meet my future wife. And in the process of getting my education, I felt like God was calling me to start a new church. And so I graduate in this mythical time called the 1900s, specifically 1999, and had been married for a year, waited on my wife to finish her nursing degree, and we moved back to where I'm from with a couple of college friends. And so we start this church. I am at the ripe old age of 23.
A baby.
In other words, I had no business doing that at all. But God did a lot of really, really cool things in spite of our youth, and in spite of the obstacles we faced. Everything that a pastor or a church planter prays doesn't happened to us. And so it was a long struggle, but over 9 years, God did a lot of really cool things. We made a lot of good friends, helped a lot of people find faith. And so in the late winter, spring of, let's see, around 2008, my wife comes home from a trip down to see her parents down this way in Eastern North Carolina.
Yeah.
And she's upset. She's like, we got to go home. And I'm like, wait a minute, what about the church? And then I stopped. It's almost if God tapped me on the shoulder and said, dude, it's time to listen and not to talk. And so I listened to what she said. And it was time to move back here so that we could just help take care of her mama. And so that's what we did. So 9 years of church planting came to an end. And when we moved down here to Greenville, North Carolina, home of the ECU Pirates, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was kind of burned out on pastoring. I didn't think my style would really fit down here. And so as I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do for a living in the process of, selling our house, looking at homes down here, my wife had no problem, finding a job. If you're a nurse, you're going to find a job anywhere. And she happened to find this ad for a hospice chaplain. It was 15 years ago. So, and I don't think it was a print ad. I think she found it online. This was when like online job stuff was just really getting started. So she's like, "Hey, you could be a hospice chaplain." I know what hospice is.
Yeah.
That's dying people, and that's insane.
Yeah.
But I decided to give it a shot, and so this was back in the day when internet job postings were first starting, and it was like crazy, wild, and feral on the World Wide Web for employment. So I filled out the application, but I bypassed the recruiter and called the director of the office directly and just said, "Hey, this is who I am. I want to apply for your position. I'm going to be down there on such and such a date. Can I come in for an interview?" And she's like, okay. So I did. I interviewed with her, did a interview with some of my potential coworkers. They believed all the lies that I said. There were no lies.
Sure. All of them.
They said, "Hey, you've got the job." And so did a little bit of training with a guy who had been a hospice chaplain for many years. Learned a lot from him, but I still really wasn't sure until I went to see my first patient. And within 60 seconds, I knew this was exactly what I was supposed to be doing.
Wow.
I only met this gentleman one time. He passed away about a week after I met him. But the cool thing is through a completely different thing, I still am in contact with his wife through a breakfast ministry we both serve at, which is the coolest thing ever. So, and yeah, for the last 15 years, I have done roughly 15,000 visits with patients, have either directly or indirectly helped around 2,500 people. When you count in family members, speaking with them, listening to them, counseling them, we're looking at somewhere between, conservatively 5,000, more than likely 7,000 to 8,000 people that I've been able to serve as a hospice chaplain.
So, what is it about a hospice chaplain when they come in? Like, how do you build rapport right away with someone, right? Like when you think about someone who's dying at the end of their life, like, I mean, you're coming at the shit end of typically people like starting to handle grief and deal with grief and like knowing what's coming. So like, how do you build rapport right away? What does that look like?
You don't.
Okay.
You can write in. Now, depending on the situation, there are a lot of the folks that I minister to, I only get to see them once or twice, maybe 3 times if I'm lucky. Now, there are a lot of folks that I get to spend several months with, and in rare cases, a year or more. And those are the cases that really get the full benefit of hospice because they get the time to be able to process whatever is on their heart and mind. And so there is some time with them to build some rapport, but you never know how long you're going to get. So what I do when I go in to see somebody for the first time is I'll go in and introduce myself and tell them, this is my spiel. Pretend you are my patient.
Yeah.
Like, "Hey, Jane, nice to meet you. I just wanted to come introduce myself to you today and let you know what I do with our hospice team. My job is twofold. I give our nurses an extra set of eyes and ears for the folks that I go see. Depending on the situation, sometimes people, maybe they're having a lot of pain. Maybe they're short of breath. Maybe there's some extra confusion or agitation. And if I'm in the home, instead of the family having to call our office, who then has to call the nurse, who then has to call back, I can bypass everybody and call the nurse directly and take care of what's going on. But my main job is to see what our patient's spiritual needs may be. And that's different for everybody. Been doing this a long time, roughly 15 years. I have been to every nook and cranny of Pitt County at least once, if not twice. I've heard just about every spiritual viewpoint there is. A
Wow.
lot of my folks over the years, especially the ones who were born and raised here, they're still members of the church that they were children in.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of folks that I've seen over the years that are people of very deep faith, but they haven't been a part of a church for a long time for a variety of reasons, and that's okay. And sometimes I meet people who don't share my faith, and that's all right too. My job is not to come into somebody's home to convert them to what I believe. It's simply to see where they are spiritually, to see if they do have some spiritual support from, say, a church, a pastor, or even a friend or a family member, and to see if there's any kind of spiritual issues that maybe people have been thinking about but haven't yet had a chance to process. And if that's the case, I want to help.
Wow.
99 times out of 100, that spiel kind of replaces what the time it takes to build rapport with people. That kind of helps advance that a little bit. They know exactly why I'm there. They know what I'm not going to do,
Yeah.
but they also know what I will do. I will say this: there's a huge difference between a pastor and a chaplain. A
What's the difference?
pastor, okay, a pastor can come in to someone's home whenever they want. They can talk about whatever they want. Hopefully they're going to listen and let their church member drive that conversation.
Yeah.
But they can almost come in with an agenda if they need to. I cannot just go whenever I want to see somebody. Medicare regulations drive what we do, and I have to tell Medicare how many times a month I'm going to go see a patient.
Mm.
The industry standard is 2 times a month. Now, I can go more often if I need to, or if people want a little less, I can go once a month. But I can't just show up. And I have to let the patient and the family drive the conversation. I am not there to convert people. That's the most important thing to know about hospice chaplaincy. Is
Wow.
I am there to, like your season's all about, I'm there to simply be with this person,
Yeah.
to be with this family, and whatever they want to talk about. It may be the big things like life and death, God, heaven. If that's the case, we can walk through those things as they need to. Some people just want to know if it's raining outside or who won the ball game last
Yeah.
night. Spirituality is different things to different people at different times. And so, whatever they need when I come, whatever they want to talk about, that is what we'll talk about. And if they're not feeling like talking and all they want is maybe some prayer or some scripture, that's okay too. That's what I'll do. So, my job is 100% patient driven. They set the agenda, they set what we're going to talk about or what we're going to do, and they tell me what kind of interventions that they would like of a spiritual nature. The only place where that's a little different is with folks who have maybe advanced Alzheimer's or dementia.
Mm.
And then, I talk with the family to get some spiritual background to see what it is that they enjoyed while before they got sick, and then do my best to just be there with that person, in the moment, even if it's just to sit quietly with them and maybe pray for them. So yeah, that's my job in a nutshell.
Tell me one of your weirdest experiences with a patient, like something that just had you got in the car and you were like, shit, I did not expect that to happen.
So maybe you've heard that dying people, as they get closer to death, that they see people who aren't there.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've heard that.
they know that physically they're not there, but they see them just the same. Sometimes they just see them. Sometimes they have conversations with them. In
Mm.
my experience, 75% of the time, it's their mother. or another, and then the
Wow.
other 25% is another family member, something like that. Um, Sometimes I will have patients tell me that they saw someone and talked to them. It's always comforting. It never frightens them.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
sometimes, and sometimes I'll walk in and a person is no longer talking, but they are staring either in the corner of the room or at the ceiling fan. It's always those two things. And when they do, I know they see something or someone. And the family members notice that as well.
Wow.
And I have had one or two patients who have told me, hey, someone's in the room right now. They're standing over there, and they describe them in great detail. So
My arm hairs up.
wow,
Oh,
that's pretty wild. And
yeah.
I have seen way too much. I believe them when they tell me. I totally
Okay.
believe them.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
What's one thing you think, when you're watching these families, you're watching these patients, and they're at the end of the road, right? It's crazy. We wake up and we have all these plans for our life, like every single day, right? I can think of this week I have all mapped out. But you said earlier, like, we may not see that person again. So, how are you with these family members, and how can people who are navigating others and being in relationship with them, like if they're going through grief, how do you support people who are going through grief? Like, what does that look like? Like, I think I have an idea of what it looks like, but how do you actually support people in grief?
One
Genuinely,
word,
and like in like a no bullshit, like actually this is what matters.
presence.
Mm,
By far, presence. Just going into someone's home and being with them. Silence is very, very powerful. And we as a culture are very uncomfortable with silence.
yeah.
Uh, Sometimes I have to force myself to not say anything and just sit with a patient or family member and just let them marinate in silence until they feel like speaking.
Mm,
And so presence is very important, especially in grief. There is there's a Bible story that kind of reflects this, the story of Job. Job goes through a whole lot of shit, and it's really, that story is crazy. When
yes.
you go and look at it, it's insane.
Yeah.
But once he goes through all this stuff and he is sitting there in grief, his friends come and they sit with him for 7 days and say nothing. That's how the book should have ended.
Yeah.
But when did stuff get wild? When they decided to talk and they said the wrong stuff. So, in our culture, when someone is grieving, we have really good intentions
Yes.
on what to say to someone who is grieving. And we say some things that are quite harmful and not helpful at all. Things like, your loved one's in a better place. They want their loved one here.
Yeah.
And even if faith is strong, there's this tension. Yes, they're not suffering, but they want them here. Or with the death of, say, a child, I see this one a lot. Heaven just needed another angel. And whew, that one is so harmful. There's a movie called Rabbit Hole with Nicole Kidman that is about a couple who grieves the loss of a child, and they go to a grief support group. And another dad who's grieving the loss of his child says, God just needed another angel. And Nicole Kidman interrupts him and said, if God needed another angel, he could just make one. And
Mm,
that's exactly right. Or things like, well, this was just God's plan. Really? God's plan is to take people's lives and cause immense emotional, mental, and even spiritual pain, suffering, and even trauma. That's his plan. That doesn't quite line up. So many other things that we have good intentions with,
yeah.
and we want to say them to help people feel better, and it's not what's called for. Presence is what's called for. And so I always tell people, if you have to say something to someone that is grieving a loss, here's what you say:
Okay.
I'm sorry. That's it. If you feel like you have to say more, I'm sorry for your loss. That's it. And just be with that person and realize that grief is different for everybody.
Mm,
Um, it never ends. I've lost a lot of friends in the last 20 years, way more than I should have.
Yeah.
And I
I thought you
grieve
were gonna
every
say
single.
family members, thinking older, not friends.
I've lost a few, but I've lost a lot of friends too. Like I lost my grandfather back in 1990 when I was 12. I think about him just about every day. My grandmother waited 16 years to go be with him, and I think about her just about every single day. But I have friends who, they were gone too soon, and I grieve each of them differently. There are some similarities, like most of the time I don't think too much about it. I'll have a pleasant thought, but every once in a while, it could be a song that comes on. It could be a memory that will trigger some tears. But at this point right now, I'm far long enough in that grief journey where those tears also have smiles,
Yeah.
because I've learned to be thankful for the time that I had with them. And even though it's okay to be angry and upset for the time that I didn't, that has started to fade a lot. And I'm just thankful for the time that I had. And because of the faith that I have, I believe I'm going to see him again one day. And that comforts me. Now, that may not comfort everybody. But yeah, everybody grieves differently. But the one thing that helps just about everybody is presence. Just being there with the person, physically present, being a shoulder to cry on. If they want to talk, let them talk, but just don't bring the platitudes and any of that.
Like, don't
Just
say
be
anything
somebody.
extra. Don't be extra. Don't be extra.
Don't be extra. Don't be bougie, ratchet, any of the other things the young people say. Just be. That's it.
So I've read somewhere, and what I've tried to do and how I try to be with other people is that when people are going through something, I want to try to like give options to like what they want. So like if I know somebody likes something specific and I know that they're like going through something, right? Like sometimes I'll give an option. Hey, I'm going to come stop by. Do you want this, or this? Do you have
Mm-hmm.
any of those needs, right? Because I think of like my mom brain, like I'm thinking, did I make sure I like have enough toilet paper in the house? I'm gonna be out of coffee creamer. So like sometimes being with people, I feel like is as simple as a bag of groceries. And so like, do you find that that helps too? Like, do you notice that when you're navigating people with grief, people feel comforted by stuff like that?
Yeah, it depends on the person. It depends on the
Yeah.
situation. There's sometimes, again, just stopping by and, expressing heartfelt condolences. Sometimes that's enough. We hear people all the time say, call me if you need anything.
Yeah, it's bullshit. I really think it's bullshit. Is it bullshit?
It's total bullshit.
All right, I
No,
thought so.
no one's going to call, because
Yeah.
in their grief, they don't want to impose
Yeah.
on other people. And so instead, yeah, if they need food. Now, I will say this: the church in the United States has a whole lot wrong with it. Okay. But the church in the South gets one thing right. When someone dies, they will feed the shit out of people.
That's amazing.
Like almost too much. Like they will bring stuff a freezer, stuff a fridge. It's almost too much. And the family sometimes gets overwhelmed, but that's what we know how to do. We
Yeah.
know how to feed people, because food is life, but food is also comfort.
Yeah.
Um,
I've
food
always
is,
believed that about food and like the way that you can care for others. Like the one thing that all people have in common, everybody got to fucking eat. Everybody got to
I
eat.
mean, if I'm sad and you bring me some fucking Taco Bell, I will be left. Okay. So yeah,
Taco Supreme, soft shell, Diet Pepsi. Heard.
we do know how to do that. If it's a young couple with children, offer to babysit. You
Yeah.
know, children are feral. You know this.
I
They're crazy,
understand. I
but
understand.
handle them for a few hours just to let a cup, even if they just go out and get a cup of coffee,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, a bag of groceries. Just doing things that you have to be very observant. You have to be able to read the room, but just see what the needs are, and then do it, and
Mm.
then do it. And there's almost, how do I phrase this? There's almost like a cultural dance that we do.
Yeah.
Taking permission, I think, is good as well. And the way it goes is, hey, I'm going to bring a meal. Is that okay? no, we're fine. Oh, no, it's no problem. We can do that. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
little back and forth. Go through the cultural dance if you need to, because eventually people will say, you know what, it's okay, and they'll appreciate the gesture very much.
Yeah. All right, listeners. So you've heard it first that we can be with other people in our presence, our physical presence, saying less, saying much less. And then, doing that little dance of like, hey, gonna help. Here's some thoughts. Would you like any of these options? Would you like none of the above? And so I think that as we go out and be with other people, I think that this episode specifically helps people when they're going through grief, when they're going through that whole hospice stage, because that's something new too that I think a lot of people don't really talk about. And so thanks for sharing your very weird stories and about how, when they say that they see somebody, believe them. I swear, I think like tonight, I feel like my arm hair is going to still be up on my arm. But I think that we can learn how to be better individuals with other people and learning how to like live in community. One last question that I did not ask before. So if you're going through grief, how do you think you can care for yourself well?
Okay. Here's something that I came up with. It's like a little acrostic. This is
Okay.
what people need to heal.
Mm,
There's your letters from grief.
okay.
You need helping relationships. That's your support system. And it's not big. You don't need a ton of people, just 2 or 3 at most. These are the folks who are not going to tell you to get over it. They're not going to say, hey, enough time has passed.
Mm,
They're going to be there and say, how can I help you today? What can I do for you today? And just, they'll be there for you and they will support you through it. So you need that support system. E is enough time.
mm,
I have had I've had folks who have been married to their spouse for 70 years and their spouse dies. And when I follow up with them, they'll say, why isn't this better yet? I'm like, that's 70 years that was just torn apart by death. It's not going to just heal overnight. Grief takes time, and that's okay. Um, we live in a culture where we
move
want
on. You're fine.
yeah,
You're
and
fine.
we want things instantly. We
Mhm.
want them now, and we want to avoid the negative feelings. One of my I love movies. One of my favorite animated films of all time is Inside Out.
Mm.
And look, if you show me that clip with Bing Bong right now, I will fucking cry. It hits me every time. That was so well done. Now,
Mhm.
part of the movie is a bit of a train wreck
Yeah.
because Riley, the girl, had a full on mental breakdown and just snapped out of it. That's not how
Mhm.
that works.
Yeah, no.
But
Mm-mm.
but what did work, what I loved about it was showing how the different emotions that we have serve a purpose, and that those things we feel are negative, they're not negative at all. Like sadness is a profound emotion
Yeah.
that needs to be felt within the depths and the core of our being. There's a reason that, I think God gave that emotion to us, because I believe that he feels it as well. When we look at Jesus and his when he goes to raise his friend Lazarus from the dead, he knows what he's going to do. And yet the shortest verse in the English Bible, John 11:35, says that Jesus wept.
Mm-hmm.
He was sad at what grief did. And so those emotions are so important to be felt. And so we need to give ourselves the time to go through those emotions. And I promise that those big emotions, they do get better with time. Think about it like being at the beach. Say you're at the beach during, as a hurricane's moving through.
Mm-hmm.
The waves are fast and they're coming in rapidly. And initial grief is like that. You feel like you can barely keep your head above water. Now,
Yeah.
eventually, the timing of the wave spaces out. You can get up to breathe a little. It's still big, it's still a lot. But eventually, the waves get smaller and distance out. Now, every once in a while, a rogue wave will come and it'll hit and it'll be tough, but it does get better over time. So realize that grief takes time and that it'll take the rest of your natural life. You know,
Mm.
grief leaves us with scars on our hearts.
Yeah.
And scars are tough, but you know what scars do? They tell a story.
Always.
And always. And those stories that we can tell of those we have loved and lost, I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit. Good memories are amazing. So before I get there,
Yeah.
So support system, time. A is be active.
Okay.
Active lifestyle. I have found that people who get back to being active, whatever that looks like, it may be work, it may be a hobby, whatever it is, that allows the brain to do what the brain does. I'm old, so file cabinets still make sense to me. I see the mind as like a room full of file cabinets, and whoever's up there working is constantly rearranging stuff, refiling, reorganizing. And when we do things that get our mind off grief for a little bit, it allows the brain to do some processing in the background. And it's the folks that don't do anything, the ones who kind of stay home and just watch TV, they wonder why they just focus on grief all the time, because there's nothing to distract their minds. Yeah. I'm not talking about who can't. I'm talking about people who won't. And I've met some of those folks before. So being active just, it gives your mind something else to focus on while it processes. And I have found that people have the hardest time at night because it's when they settle down.
Mm-hmm. Their mind gets a little bit more quiet.
Exactly. And then it's just for a small part of the day. So be active if you can. And then that last thing, the L, is looking back to move forward. That is your good memories. And if you have a treasure trove of good memories of that person you love that you've lost, at first they may be hard. You'll think about them and it'll bring tears, but eventually those good memories are good medicine for the heart. I encourage folks to talk about their loved one early, very quickly, like sometimes within minutes after they pass. I can always tell the families who are going to cope well because after their loved one passes, they're talking about them. They may be crying, but they're also laughing. Remember the time at Christmas when Grandpa, dropped the turkey on the floor, and they laugh about it, and it helps them grieve. So good support system if you can get it. Take enough time, be active if you can, and those memories. And if you have to have just one, to me, this is just me. Okay. The good memories are the most vital because they are that balm to the wounded soul. So that's what folks need to do as they heal from grief.
That's amazing, amazing thought about how we take care of ourselves in grief, right? A lot of this podcast, we talk about how we're with people. And I think that we forget how to learn how to be with ourselves and how to treat ourselves well. And so like treat our mind well, right? We talk about health and fitness all the damn time, but like working on this takes a lot of effort. And so listeners, you've got a lot of meat here tonight. So you've got a little bit of caring for yourself when you're going through grief and this hospice thing. Some of the weird stories that have occurred and some of the things that have occurred during his time as, a hospice chaplain. And then also the ways in which that you can be with other people during their grief and while they work through the hospice stuff. And so, Aaron, life is better with you in it. Listeners, life is better with you in it. Be good to each other. And I think that we can all grow tonight a little bit from learning how to be with each other and with ourselves. So that was it. Have a great night.